We're here at Court Square, and it's time for the only line besides the shuttles that runs a significantly shorter train length at all times. It's the G train's turn. We may have talked about the elevated platforms before, but there are two sets of underground platforms to explore as well. In the passageway between the E&M and the G train platform, there's the exit to One Court Square. This passageway is a newer addition to the station, and this exit is actually quite modern. This includes the nice glass ceiling here. Also, remember how I said that the 7 train station used to be named 45th Road Courthouse Square? Well, the I&D got in on the fun too. At the bottom of the 7 train escalator, you can see an I&D tiled sign that directs you to 45th Road. But back to the longer passageway that connects you to the E&M trains, you have some beautiful artwork to keep you busy. It's got a simple name too, Stream. The final fact about this long passageway is that it used to have moving sidewalks. However, they were removed. Anyways, time to go down to the platform. Because of the G train's half-size length, you can go to the part at Court Square where trains don't stop and see how the platform just gets less maintained immediately. You're able to see this phenomenon at other stations, but this is where it's most obvious. On the walls, you can also see depictions of the courthouse, of which the station was named after. On the topic of names, this station used to be called Long Island City Court Square, but when the complex was made to just have one name, Court Square, the Long Island City part was dropped. And finally, this isn't the true start, because of course, the tracks will go north to Queens Plaza on the Queens Boulevard line. Although only on weekends, the G train did go all the way to Forest Hills before 2010's budget cuts. But despite it seeing 14.5 years of no regular usage, you can see where the tracks carry on as if nothing happened. We then head to our only other station in Queens, 21st Street, Van Alst. Don't worry, it's not the 7 train all over again. This is the only subname that doesn't make sense anymore. But the reason there's Van Alst in the name is that 21st Street used to be called Van Alst Avenue. 21st Street is the least used station on the G train, and despite being one of the few island platform stations, it's completely empty. Heading to the very northern end of the platform, you can look through the tunnels and see where the crossover switch immediately starts. It's at the southern end where trains don't really stop, but it's also where they're coming out of the Newtown Creek Tunnel, so they go in pretty fast. But don't actually wait here for a train, as you'll have to run. Also, the southern end of the platform slopes down significantly, and while it's not as obvious on camera, you can still see it with the tiling. There also is an abandoned part of the mezzanine over the southern half of the platform. On the mezzanine that remains, there are still closed parts behind iron bars, but you can't see the full extent of what used to remain here. You can look behind construction walls to get a little more, but this is really all you're gonna get. But still on the mezzanine is the lone bench, part of the waiting area. Before we go, let's check out the weird-looking Do Not Cross sign. But now, let's go to Brooklyn, where the rest of the G line is. Our first stop and the northernmost station in Brooklyn, Greenpoint Avenue. The columns actually did used to be green here, but they were since painted black. It's the only station to exclusively serve the G train that's also accessible. The staircases are also more modern looking than at other stations, and there's even this extra thin one. Also, if you really didn't think that trains used to continue down the Queens Boulevard line, then there's this I&D tiled sign that says to Long Island City and Jamaica. Our next stop, Nassau Avenue Station. Although not easy to see on camera, there is a crossover north of the station, which allows trains to terminate here. Also, this is where the line ended originally. No, not from Brooklyn, but from Court Square. The mezzanine here is a very weird structure, as it's split into 2 portions, one before fare control and the other after. Also, the staircases go up a little bit for the true crossover. The mezzanine was actually planned to be made entirely unpaid as part of the L train project to increase capacity. However, this never happened. Also, Nassau Avenue Station is becoming accessible, and I don't really get why that's happening now when Greenpoint Avenue and Metropolitan Avenue, the 2 adjacent stations, are also accessible. Nassau can be done later, but why not do a station in the long zone of inaccessibility between Broadway and 4th Avenue 9th Street? We can admire the rather creative vandalism, but we're not leaving just yet. Here are two things that are at most crosstown stations. First off, this wire thing that you can see at all side platform stations is the mounting rack for CBTC equipment. Also, the tile work on the crosstown line is exclusively green. Since there's no real express station to change the color, it's just all green. Maybe explains why they made the G trains color green. We head to Metropolitan Avenue Lorimer Street, or as the IND station used to be called, Metropolitan Avenue Grand Street. The IND tiling will still mention the transfer though. But speaking of the transfer, considering our elevator shenanigans from last time we were here, we never actually went down the existing one. On the bottom of the walls, there's a singular lime-colored tile, and it actually changes to an orange-colored tile as soon as you hit BMT territory. This orange tile continues onto the entirety of the L train platform. We then head to Broadway Station, which could have been a lot larger had the IND second system gone through. The shell for the South 4th Street subway platforms at the station still exists, and it's known as the Underbelly Project. This station's also equidistant to the J and M train stations at Hughes Street and Lorimer Street. However, there's no free transfer between any of them. However, when you're walking to Lorimer Street Station, you can see a brown M sign. What's even crazier is that there used to be a tiling mistake, with the station being spelled Broadway on one of the black tile bands. Unfortunately, this is no longer the case. Next up is Flushing Avenue, of which is on a very gentle curve. On the southbound platform, there seems to be a manhole cover, but I don't know where it actually goes. At the northern end, there's also the abandoned exit to Walton Street. There's tiling that mentions it, and also you can see the exit itself, and there's still quite a bit to it. Our next stop is Myrtle-Willoughby Avenue Station, where the ceilings are quite low. In fact, the tile band is actually at the same level as the name tablets, so they have to stop for them. And while there are quite a few underpasses located along the G line, this one is the only one where the staircases to access the underpass are not bordering the wall. You can also see how the wall slants to make it slightly wider in this area. Also, you can see a 6-car stop marker, which harkens back to the days of 6-car married pair R46s on the G. And while the Jamaica Yard R160s are experiencing wheel problems, this is probably the last month where you can ever experience SMEs on the G train. After that, it's R211Ts, which will be interesting to see. Finally, the abandoned exit at the southern end of the platform, and there is a lot visible here. Sheer size separates this exit from all the other abandoned exits on the G. Bedford-Nostrand Avenues is the next stop, and it has 3 tracks, the only crosstown line station to do so. Now, when I first got to this station, I thought I made a mistake all the way back in the A train video. In fact, it has some unusually thin platforms, especially for the IND. In fact, these 2 platforms are the thinnest platforms of the entire IND network. But I stand by my word. The platforms at Bedford-Nostrand are a little bit thicker than the ones at Euclid Avenue. It's also interesting to note that this station is quite a bit brighter than some of the other crosstown stations. It's important to mention the reasoning for this middle track, and that's once again IND second system provisions. And finally, a trip up to the mezzanine, and in true IND fashion, it's very overbuilt. We then get to the only crosstown line station to truly have one exit, not even any abandoned ones, and that's Classon Avenue. Now, Bedford-Nostrand may have been the only crosstown station to have 3 tracks, but Classon Avenue has space for a 3rd track. It's quite dirty down there in the bed, but it makes for an interesting crosstown station. It's the closest thing to what a local crosstown station would look like if it were built with a 3rd track. Once again, an overbuilt mezzanine, which right now is a slight labyrinth due to the elevator construction. Next up is Clinton-Washington Avenue station, which used to have a face in the O on one of the tiles. Okay, this was vandalism and not the MTA. It's not like Broadway. But that doesn't mean there aren't things to say about Clinton-Washington Avenues. For one, there are the high ceilings, and there's also these columns which are not aligned properly. And then, the very confusing mezzanine, which has an elaborate system of mesh fences that separate the unpaid area and the paid area. This is the only station to my knowledge that does it to this extent, and there's even some abandoned portions of the mezzanine closed off behind the fences. And it just goes on and on when you're walking through the passageways. Once again, the I&D is very overbuilt, and keep in mind this is a pretty minor station. Next stop, Fulton Street, the final station that only serves the G. It's not nearly as busy as the station with the same name in Lower Manhattan, but it does have its crowding moments. Before the reopening of the second exit, Fulton Street required you to go under the passageway to get to the Queens-bound platform. You'll still need to do this if you use the main entrance. By the way, there's signage directing you to both the Barclays Center and the Long Island Railroad, as the station is very close to Atlantic Terminal, but there's no in-system connection to Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center. The second exit is a lot more compact and has a few interesting features to it. You can see this banister, which is evidence that the mezzanine was larger, and sure enough, back on platform level, there is another abandoned staircase. There's also this door, which leads to the track crew quarters. Though we can't forget Fulton Street being the only crosstown station to have these walls in between the two tracks, we then head on to Hoyt-Schermerhorn Station. The station's extremely wide since it has 6 tracks. The inner 2 tracks are for the G, the middle ones are for the A and the C, and the very outer ones are abandoned, but of course lead to the Transit Museum. This station also might be the most used in film, as the abandoned platforms allow for an easy set, without having to disrupt passenger service. There's also this strange oddity of the Queens-bound platform having thick tiled columns, while the Church Avenue/Manhattan-bound platform has painted columns. Finally, interesting tiling on the mezzanine with the off-white and dark blue colored tiles. Before heading to our next stop at Bergen Street, we merge with the F train and will be interlining with it for the rest of the journey. And there's the merge point, which actually happens to be right outside Bergen Street, so you're able to see it. Bergen Street is most well known for its abandoned lower-level platforms, of which the giant metal doors lead to. You can peek through to get a very slim view and even see some tiling that says express trains. Just from this photo, you might be able to recognize Bergen Street, with its unusual platform edge designs, being mostly gray-colored but having a strip of yellow and 2 orange strips. You actually can't cross over here, and due to this station potentially being a transfer, there's signage telling you this. But on the mezzanine, there are weird tiles. Even platform level has interesting tiles, as the border color for the tile band is colored light green, and there's also this other tile pattern that you wouldn't see anywhere else. There's also a bit of construction here, makes you wonder if they're reviving the lower level. And now Carroll Street. First off, the columns here are thick but not tiled, which is unusual. Of course, the notable thing about this station is that the express tracks are now visible, and they actually rise up right here. But the best part of the station is its modern second entrance. On mezzanine level, there's a strange closed-off part, but it's time to head back to the F and G trains, and it seems there's finally a light at the end of the tunnel. Welcome to Smith 9th Streets, the tallest station in the MTA and the second tallest in the world. Despite being one of the 2 elevated stations built by the I&D, there are actually tiles here. The barrier on the unsheltered part of the platform is interesting with a mixture of concrete, metal, and mesh, and the lamps overhead. Now, the way that the I and D built their elevated is much different from the classic elevateds. A lot more of it is made of concrete, and it's also very wide. There are also the famous green trusses. The southbound platform has wonderful views, and pulling back, you can see the metal framing along the windows. Heading closer to the exit, and we can see the singular bench and singular sign, and the wall is pretty blank. But we can't forget how sky-high this station is. Going down the exit, there's not one pair of escalators, but two. But at street level, look up, and you'll see a nice stained glass artwork. The exterior of the station's sole entrance has this rounded design to it. Slightly less pleasing to look at is the metal exterior of the upper mezzanine. Going back up to that mezzanine, and it's the place where you cross over between the two platforms. But here's the most important thing to know about this station. Smith 9th Street was the original terminal of the G train. It's not a great terminal, since trains will have to go to 4th Avenue 9th Street to relay, but that's not the reason the G got extended to Church Avenue. It was because of the nearly 2-year-long renovation to this station. Yes, the one that gave the viaduct the black polka dots. In fact, this station was one of the worst in the system before its renovation. But anyways, the G train had to extend to Church Avenue Station. Despite this being a temporary measure, there was a lot of public support for this to be made permanent, so it was. And in that case, we carry on to 4th Avenue 9th Street. Fourth Avenue 9th Street is the only station to truly have no I&D tiling. But what it does have are these nice sandy bricks. The signs only say 4th Avenue here, and you can also see where some windows once were. But there is a window at the western end of the platform, and it's where it passes over 4th Avenue, and it looks very grand. Also in that area are these nice little brick columns. This station's quite a bit closer to ground level compared to Smith and 9th, and we're about to head underground once more. And here we are at 7th Avenue, which is technically an express station. First things first, the wall tiles, which are very dirty and in not a great condition at all. However, the other parts of the station aren't that bad. This station is the newest accessible station on the G, and one of the newest in the system. The platform is also a lot cleaner looking than most other stations, as it was also renovated. There's also this closed exit, which can work as an emergency exit. So, maybe don't explore it, but if you really want to, you can. Because the G train only uses 4 or 5 cars, you'll always see these G train boarding signs so you know where to stand. However, at this station, there are F train and even F express train boarding signs, and it's in an interesting location. And then there's 15th Street Prospect Park, notable for exclusively having the thicker, white-tiled columns. Speaking of tiles, there's an I&D tiling anomaly at this station. Well, 2 actually, because of a different shade of yellow being used for the tile band at the northern end of the platform. There's a secret code to the tile bands. When it's 2 tiles thick, that means it's a local station. When it's 3 tiles thick, that means it's an express station. 15th Street Prospect Park has 3 tiles, even though it's a local station. But wait, where are the express tracks anyways? Well, the express tracks between 7th and Church are one of 2 sets that take a physical shortcut. The other is on the Queens Boulevard line, and yes, both are I&D. Heading up to the mezzanine, yet again, it's very long, but the exit's actually pretty interesting. Along with having the orange tiles, it's a parkside exit. Interesting how there's one of these for Central Park and one of these for Prospect Park. We make a brief stop at Fort Hamilton Parkway Station, where at the northern end, the platform gets very wide for the exit. And then we get to the real last stop, Church Avenue. Just like at 7th Avenue, it's clear that the walls need a deep cleaning. There's also the subway bathrooms on the mezzanine, which have a ramp connecting to them, and there's tiling that says men or women. But we are at the end of the line here. G trains head south into Church Avenue Yard, where they wait to be turned around for northbound service. Only F trains will continue on to Coney Island, but for now, let's end here.